Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with the Average Joe Sports Show. It happened again. Yes, a walk-off.
Mitch Sherman here. We'll talk about the future for both of Nebraska's coordinators.
Hi, it's Bill Doleman. We'll talk about the coaching carousel that never stops.
It's Elijah Herbel. We'll wrap this show by talking conference championship week and some playoff implications.
Episode 20 is here. It's the Average Joe Sports Show. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Subscribe. Find us with the YouTube, the Average Joe Sports Show, the AJ Sports Show, and Twitter. Give us a follow there, the AJ Sports Pod. Everyone make it through Thanksgiving. Everyone do all right when it comes to the leftover part. Oh, yeah, there's a Black Friday football game to talk about. Mitch, good to see you.
Good to see all of you guys. I'm remote today. It's not my normal Monday spot there in the studio with you all, but I'll be back in Lincoln at some point this week. We're going to hear from Matt Rule about what Nebraska football looks like going forward. So I'm looking forward to that conversation after what we saw on Friday. Another close loss for Nebraska, and who could have ever imagined that Nebraska would finish the season the same way that it began the season, with a 13-10 defeat where it turned the ball over in the last minute, got gashed defensively, and gave up a field goal as time expired. I mean, that's like the kind of thing that happens to you once every 10 years, and that's how year one began for Matt Rule, and that's how it sadly ended, keeping the Huskers out of a bowl game for yet another season.
It just feels like an eternity for Nebraska fans where you're going on now year 7, home for the holidays.
It's amazing to me how that just defies almost the laws of physics, of nature, of science, to have 3 losses, 13-10, all on the last play of a game, all field goals, and to just repeat, beginning and end with one near the end. Another season full of one-score losses and what might have been. I mean, would it be better? No, it would not be better if Nebraska just got blown out week after week after week. Or are these gut-wrenching losses and what might have been more tolerable?
Well, look at the month of November. Where does this rank in terms of most frustrating Novembers in Nebraska football history? And I know you guys probably have some more seasons than I do under my memory bank, but it's up there for me. You have a chance to be bowl eligible every single game in November, and in every single game in November, you have a chance to go win that football game, and you let them all slip through your fingertips. Like, the Michigan State is the one that I think maybe you go, well, Michigan State had that one, but then you wonder, well, if Chuba's in the second half of that game, does Nebraska go and win? You have Maryland. If you kick the field goal, do you win that? Against Wisconsin, if you quote-unquote play for the touchdown and use your timeouts a little bit better at the end, do you win that football game? And then Iowa, if you don't throw an interception on that last drive, do you give Alvano a shot to go win that football game? Do you go win it? There's just, what a frustrating month of November to have to watch this Husker football team, because it felt like every single game they should have gotten to bowl eligibility, and they let it slip through their fingertips in all 4.
A lot of what-ifs. A lot of what-ifs, Mitch and fellas.
Four losses by 16 points. You just don't see that. I mean, November, September, whatever it is, that's just the kind of stretch of football that just it takes everything out of you, I think, if you're a fan of this team and you're sitting there on the cusp of something that this program has now begun to strive for. I mean, when this bowl drought started in 2017, nobody was thinking, hey, Nebraska's got to get bowl eligible to create some level of success. 2018, 2019, and you start thinking about this. And even in 2020, when Nebraska had an opportunity to go to a bowl and turn down that chance in the COVID year, it still wasn't to the point where bowl eligibility meant so much to the program that you would trade just about anything to get to that place. And that's where we are here in 2023. And the way that it ended, I think was symbolic of the whole month. And I'm talking about Nebraska getting the ball back with less than a minute to go, 30 some odd seconds to go. And it has the ball after Tommy Hill's interception of Deacon Hill, and it gets the ball across midfield. The worst thing in your mind that could happen then for Nebraska is that it doesn't get in field goal range or Alvano misses a field goal and you're going to overtime for a second consecutive week. I don't know that I would have felt great about overtime for Nebraska against Iowa, but at that point, a loss in regulation is out of the, it's not one of the options, and yet it still happened. A turnover, and you guys know the rest.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's go back to the fourth quarter, the final 3 minutes. Let's raise our hand here if you were expecting something bad to happen. I'm serious.
I know you are.
I'm dead dog serious. Were you just waiting to get to overtime or to be surprised that they converted? They made it happen. They were able to score some points off of a turnover. Tommy Hill made a great pick, and then all hell broke loose, and you have trading turnovers, a missed tackle, a 22-yard gallop, flashback to the Maryland finish, right, where defense has been nails all season long.
Flashback to even Minnesota,
right.
too. It's shades of
the defense is absolutely bulletproof for 58 minutes, right? There's one bleeping missed tackle in the game that's glaring, and there's 22 yards. Iowa ran the ball pretty well, actually, but point is it sets him up. Biscuits and Gravy slides to his left, dead center. Kicker that's never attempted a field goal goes on, busts one in for 38. But I was waiting for something bad to happen. I was surprised that Nebraska got a turnover. I know Iowa's passing game's not great, but good on Tommy Hill for making that pick. I was like, okay, things may have flipped. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm just watching the clock. I'm sitting next to a bunch of Nebraska fans, and in unison, they just start screaming F-bombs. They are so pissed. They are so pissed because it happened again, and who did it to them?
Well, I was sitting here in the studio watching the game, ready for our post-game show, and I had your mic on, Schmidt, and I think your TV feed is about 15 seconds ahead of my streaming feed, so I heard the Tommy Hill interception. I heard it happen before it happened. I heard the Husker fans in the bar go crazy, and I immediately shut off your mic because I knew something bad was going to happen. I thought it was going to be, I can't wait to see how Nebraska manages to lose this game in overtime. I didn't think for the life of me that with 40 seconds left they could manage to lose it in regulation, but they surprised me yet again.
People are forgetting that there was a penalty on the Tommy Hill interception return.
Mm-hmm, the hold.
Right. And instead of getting the ball at what would have been the 37-yard line, Nebraska's got a penalty that backs them up across midfield, and that changes, of course, the way you approach moving the ball down the field to get into field goal range. The win was coming in out of the north, but for the most part, where Hill ended up would have been fairly close to field goal range as it was. But the penalty moved them back. So the bad things already started happening during the midst of something very good. And then Chubba Purdy, it was the equivalent of watching somebody hit off a tee and there's only one lone tree like in the fairway or that lone branch of that tree that's hanging over the fairway.
Good at it.
And you hit one perfectly down the middle, except it hits that lone tree and something bad. So he hits the linebacker right in the middle of the hands when Bullock was wide open. If that pass was caught, they're probably in field goal range right there. So there are little things that were missed, especially but the penalty on the Tommy Hill return, that was an absolute killer in how the last minute played out or 40 seconds played out.
That's a great analogy on the golf shot. That's kind of how it looked from field level. A little bit of like, look at how the sausage is made with me. Normally I'm in the press box in that situation and I'm trying to write the immediate takeaways from a win or a loss. And I basically phoned it in the middle of the fourth quarter and said, hey, I'm going to need like an hour after the game to get this done because it's coming down to the wire like all of these games do. And this one, there's really nothing that I can say that's the same if they win or they lose. Early in the year, you can kind of gauge progress in certain aspects of the game, get that on the computer screen, and it works either way. There was this game, everything rode either on a win or a loss. It was either the season's over and you're looking ahead to August which is what I'm sitting here doing here now as soon as we get done talking, is writing about this roster and where it's at for 2024, or you're celebrating the end of the bull drought and you're making plans for whatever is to come, Las Vegas, whatever it might be in December. So it's all or nothing. So I said, forget that. I'm going to get these immediate thoughts done when the game's over. I'm heading down to the field to watch this thing next to the Nebraska sideline. And that's where I was when the Tommy Hill interception occurred. And there's just this mismatch of former players who were down there. Garrett Nelson was down there in sunglasses. Like, I think he wanted to go out. He wanted to like strip someone's uniform off and put it on and go out there and play and have another senior day for himself. Larry Jacobson from the 70s was down there stomping around, various others. Just the most unusual combination of former Nebraska players that you could ever find who are down there on the sideline. And, I think everybody was thinking that, to your point about what's going to go wrong, even after the Tommy Hill interception, because there comes the penalty. And, the play that you're talking about, Bill, the interception, the golf ball in the tree in the middle of the fairway, before we move on and stop talking about Nebraska, Iowa, give credit to Phil Parker, the Iowa defensive coordinator, because that wasn't just any old linebacker who was sitting there in a zone coverage. That was a zone blitz where two linebackers blitzed and a 260-pound defensive end drops back into the spot that's normally occupied by the middle linebacker. And he's not the most mobile guy. He's not necessarily the guy that you want in coverage against a tight end who's coming over the middle, as Thomas Fidone was. And Chubba Purdy, being the inexperienced quarterback that he is not thinking about a zone blitz and a defensive end in that spot. He sees the linebackers coming in the blitz, thinks the middle of the field's going to be open, which is what you're trained to do, goes for the route over the middle of the field and throws it right to the player who was supposed to be there when Chubba made the mistake that Chubba made. Mm-hmm. So, hey, let's give some credit to Iowa, and it's great. Those things don't happen accidentally for Iowa on the defensive side. They don't just come up with those key turnovers repeatedly because they get lucky. And this was another instance of outstanding coaching, and it paid off, and it got Iowa the win.
And dare I say, give some credit to Brian Ferentz as well for, you're outside field goal range after this interception. Brian Ferentz knows what his offense is, though. He knows what his offense is, and from outside field goal range, you hand the ball off.
Because they're not going to throw to get down there, you know that.
Well, yeah, but in dare
two choices.
Dare you look in the mirror if you're Nebraska? Dare you look in the mirror if you're Nebraska and ask why you're throwing the football in that situation? Because Iowa knows what they are. They hand the football off. They know, you know what? Risk aversion. If we don't get into field goal range here, it's a walk-off 60-yard attempt, and if you miss it, we go to overtime. Whereas Nebraska's throwing the football. And I don't want to beat a dead horse with Marcus Satterfield because I know there's been a lot of complaints with his offense there. But
grab a stick. It's next.
I'd like to turn this around and Brian Ferentz last game was an Iowa Hawkeye, which if you guys noticed, he was not wearing anything Iowa branded. He was the only coach on the Iowa sideline not wearing anything Iowa branded on
Did
Friday.
They take it from him?
I think Beth Getz took it away.
Yeah, very possible. But I'm going to tip the cap to Brian and say, good on you knowing what your offense is and knowing even though we're outside field goal range here as time is expiring, our best chance to get into field goal range is handing the football off.
You pissed Mitch's dog off
by
talking about
Brian Ferentz. That's my bad.
All right, Average Joe Sports Show at YouTube. Find us, subscribe there, the AJ Sports Show. Twitter, can follow us there, the AJ Sports Pod. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. And guys, let's talk about moving forward, what that looks like for the offensive side of the ball for Nebraska. To-do list is long. I think Santa's like, I'm glad I don't have that list. And it is something to focus in on. The quarterback spot, portal, on top of what's still in your quarterback room. And guys, let's start off with all the duties that Marcus Satterfield has right now. And he's been a lightning rod for sure. And it's kind of a half full, half empty discussion point with all the injuries and inexperience, and then just the repeated mistakes that came from the quarterback spot. It didn't matter who was playing quarterback.
Nobody wants to tackle it anymore, right?
I think you have to start this offseason, if you're Matt Rule, by looking at how you do things with your coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball. And he's made it clear that Marcus Satterfield is here and he's the offensive coordinator. And fine, it's after year one. As Rule said a couple of weeks ago, Nebraska has seen how these things go when you just make changes because you feel like a change needs to be made and it's a rash decision. It hasn't gone well. As like just about everything for Nebraska over the past couple of decades, changing coaches on a whim has not gone well, whether it's the head coach or the assistant coach or the coordinators. So Satterfield is here for the long haul, or at least the next year. But the question remains as to whether he will coach the quarterbacks or whether he should coach the quarterbacks, because I think there's something to be gained for Nebraska by dividing some of those responsibilities. With the injuries that Nebraska faced on the offensive side this year, with the bottom falling out on the chosen one, Jeff Sims, early in the season because of injury, because of turnovers, and then the inexperience that it had behind Sims, when you put on Satterfield's plate the need to coach the quarterback spot, to change the offense as it was fundamentally put together, and then to also game plan every week and call plays on Saturday, I don't know that there's anybody out there who would have been able to do that all real well. He doesn't have 100 hours in the week. So Nebraska cannot afford to find itself in that position in 2024. And I think the answer is to look at having someone who's a quarterback's coach that is not also the offensive coordinator.
Well, if you go back in time, Tom was the offensive coordinator, and he had Turner Gill as his quarterback's coach. And those two worked pretty much hand in hand and knew exactly what that offense needed to do at the time. Now, look, any move that Matt Rule makes is going to be an admission that he doesn't want to make, right? He said, "I'm not gonna replace Marcus Satterfield." Okay, but if you reassign him in some way, there is an admission that things did not go well. There was a mistake made in the designated assignments, right? And I'm not sure he wants to say we made a mistake in how we passed out the responsibilities to the coaching staff. So I would be surprised if there's much change at all in terms of what the duties are. That you would wait after the first year and go into and see what happens in the second. Presumably, you're not going to have near the injuries. You're going to get it right. You would think you're going to get it right at quarterback, and you move forward and see what you can do with what your original plan was. But any move that he makes is an admission of, well, we got it wrong, and I don't think he wants to do that.
I don't know that it has to be that. I think you can make a move knowing what you know about the landscape in this program and the challenges that you face. I mean, the Big Ten is changing next year from what it was in year one under Matt Rule. So part of the motivation for the move can be to adjust with the times and the challenges that Nebraska faces. Its schedule in 2024 is very different than it was in 2023, and it's going to have to play at a different level of football just to get to the record that it got to this year, or get to 6-6 in 2024 is a different challenge than it was in 23. And I don't think Matt Rule is too proud to admit that he's able to that he's willing to adjust based on what happened in the first year. So look, he's not blowing Satterfield out of town. If he says, I'm going to have you coach another position, we're going to bring somebody in to coach the quarterbacks. Let's remember, at this time a year ago, or a few weeks from now a year ago, Nebraska was very much in the market to hire a quarterbacks coach. And it didn't work out. They went for Jake Peetz. He wanted to stay in the NFL. So Satterfield went from having a different position, whether it was going to be tight ends or he was going to be a walk-around coordinator or whatever it was going to be, to taking on the responsibility of the quarterbacks himself. That was never the intention when Matt Rule came in initially, was to have Satterfield coach the quarterback. So if you get a year down the road and you go back to what you were originally intending to do, and that was to have a quarterbacks coach who was not also assigned to coordinate the offense, I'm not sure what you're admitting. He doesn't come across, Rule doesn't come across to me as a guy who's too stuck on himself to admit that it's the best thing to do to make an adjustment.
Well, any coaching stop whenever there's a coach taking over a new program, whether it be college football or NFL. It's something I said on our Saturday morning Hail Varsity show. Part of year one is understanding that the vision that you've set out is going to have to change as you make it through year one. No one's vision coming into a college football stop is perfect. You look at even Lincoln Riley at USC. He probably should have seen the writing on the wall after year one that we're going to have to adjust how we play defense. They didn't, and what happens midway through the year, Alex Grinch is fired as the defensive coordinator. There's an aspect to adjusting what your vision is through that first year of a coaching stop. And I think there's a lot of change from that vision that Matt Rule has experienced in year one and is going to need to adjust here this upcoming offseason. I look at even Sean Payton with the Broncos this season. I'm a Broncos fan, so maybe I'm biased, but you look at the first 5 weeks of the season and compare it to the previous 5, where the Broncos have rolled off a 5-game winning streak. Sean Payton had to change his vision for what he wanted the Broncos and especially the Broncos offense to be. The defense did a little bit of retooling. They were experimenting in the first couple of weeks. They've locked in on what they do well. But the offense, they've really committed to running the football, using 3 different running backs, understanding who your pass-catching running back is going to be, despite the fact that you probably wanted it to be Javonte Williams. Russell Wilson, you know what? 150 passing yards from him is good. He's not the old Russ. They set out earlier this year with a vision of throwing the football around a little bit more with Russell Wilson, different routes from the receivers. There's an aspect in year one of any coaching stint to adjusting what your vision is going to be so that you can have your reality and your vision match up and meet somewhere down the road. Now, I think that's what we saw a lot of here in year one, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that the reality of what you have right now does not line up with what your vision is going to be, and there has to be retooling on both sides to find that middle ground where you can meet and your vision meets reality.
You saw some retooling with the adoption of more quarterback run. I think you're going to want quarterback mobility and that threat on your offense moving forward. And the question is this: can you go find or develop a sound decision maker? What killed Nebraska was quarterback turnovers, fumbles or interceptions, and you're going to throw picks here and there, but the level and the timing of a lot of these interceptions were death nails in tight ball games. So can Nebraska step back, reassess, if need be, go get a quarterback coach and tutor that can get that position better? And then can that position play better? Because, guys, I think we can agree that you saw a movement forward at the other position groups, injuries or not. You saw the defense make a giant leap and play really good football. You saw the young receiving core forced into duty, and they were options. Jalen Lloyd's specifically someone you think of. The tight ends are pretty solid. And then despite injuries, I think you saw the offensive line get pretty decent moving forward. And there's a number of those guys that could be back on top of what's waiting in the wings. So you got to have your quarterback kind of keep pace with what the rest of your offense and what the rest of your team's done.
Yeah, the number one thing that Nebraska has to fix is obviously the quarterback position, but more specifically, it's the turnovers connected to the quarterback position. 31 fumbles for Nebraska in 2023. Huskers lost 16 of them. Both of those statistics, 15. They lost 15. Both of those numbers lead the nation. 31 fumbles is 5 more than any other program in the country, which is a pretty sizable gap when you're only talking about that sample size. So more quarterback run generally means more ball security issues. So I think there will also be a reassessment. And you look at the way that Nebraska is recruiting at the quarterback position. First of all, Daniel Kalen, who is set to sign in December out of Bellevue West, he's not a guy who's going to come in and not that he will play next year, but he's not a guy who runs the option. He's more of a pocket passer. You can roll him out. He has a little bit of escapability, at least as he's shown at the high school level. I don't know about against Big Ten defenses, but he's generally a guy who can pick you apart with his arm. So that's the vision that Nebraska has for the future. The guy that they've targeted as their number one prospect in the 2025 class, Alex Mansky out of Iowa, looks to be a similar player. Somebody who can sit in the pocket and can run an offense and can look to his second and third reads and has an outstanding arm. So I think this quarterback run stuff that we saw with Jeff Sims this year to start, and then the way it carried over with Harburg and even into Purdy, I think that was more of out of necessity. Rule has talked about the importance of having a quarterback who can run because it makes a defense commit an extra player to the run game. But ultimately, I don't believe that that's his vision for this offense. And I think that's going to be reinforced, that maybe backing away some from the QB run game just because of how many turnovers it tends to lead to.
Well, like, the vision is, in your eyes, Mitch, you'd rather your quarterback run be more Gardner Minshew than RG3?
I was going to go Bernie Kosar, but your point's well taken.
That it's a quarterback that you're not
can scramble, but is not a rushing.
You may be dialing up a couple of run plays for him a game, but you don't want that to be your main rushing attack.
No, I mean, you don't want 31 fumbles. And, the majority of those fumbles came from the quarterback position. A large percentage of them did. I don't have the number in front of me of how many times the quarterback fumbled, but out of 31, I'm gonna feel pretty confident saying it was more than half. That
it's 25. It's got to be. You think about 3 from Grant and 1 from Emmett.
Right. So, there was a muffed punt here or there, but again, it's over 20. I would think that came from the quarterbacks. You're not going to have that if you're not asking that much of your quarterback in the run game. Minus 17 in the turnovers is, arguably the difference between 5 wins and 8 wins. That minus 17 is the worst that Nebraska's been. It equals the worst from the 2007 season that we've seen in the past 20 years. And the 20 years, I'll tell you, on the turnovers, as we talked about earlier this year on a previous episode, the 20 years of turnovers, it's been bad after bad after bad after bad. And this minus 17 is as bad as it's been. This is the bottom, equal with 2007. And you remember that 2007 season? It's well, maybe you don't because you've blocked it out of your mind. But it was a much different offense, I'll say, than what we saw this year.
Hey, let me go back to the coaching math because I'm trying to do this in my head, which hurts. If Nebraska was to bring in a quarterback's coach, what does the personnel look like then? Are they one heavy?
Likely have Marcus Satterfield go to tight ends, you would assume?
Okay, then then what happens to the tight ends coach?
He goes back to being an analyst?
I mean, is that where we are? I mean, you're going to have to make a change anyway. Do you combine tight ends and receivers with McGuire because he's not going anywhere?
You guys,
so that's my question.
You guys have been around college football long enough to know how the month of December goes, right? I mean, December and even into January, hey, stuff happens. Like, you're going to tell me that you don't think that there's the possibility that there's going to be somebody who moves on to another opportunity. Somebody gets plucked off Nebraska's staff. What if Garrett, wants to go coach with his dad next year? What if EJ Barthel wants to, pursue an opportunity back on the East Coast where he's comfortable? Josh Martin could pick something up in the state of Texas after his 1 year here. This is a stepping stone for him. So these things tend to work themselves out. I mean, whether Marcus Satterfield becomes a position, an offensive coordinator with a position that's different than the quarterbacks or not, I think Nebraska is still probably going to face at least one opening on its coaching staff just because of the way that the business works. Maybe that opening is on the defensive side. Maybe Terrence Knighton gets an opportunity to go to the NFL. Maybe Tony White gets an opportunity to be a head coach, and then you've got an entire shuffling of the defensive staff. Some way or another, there's going to be an opening that could then lead to Marcus Satterfield shifting responsibilities.
And what's ironic about that, and I'm not in favor of somebody getting whacked, okay? But the one who has the most attention on him, on his position, and his job performance over the last 3 or 4 months is the one guy who's probably safest of anybody, and that's Marcus Satterfield.
Or the least likely to move,
right?
Because
exactly.
He's not going to have opportunities.
Of all the stuff that you say will happen, and I agree with you, and I'm just kind of throwing that out there rhetorically somewhat, but of all the things that could happen in the next month and a half for Nebraska football, the one thing that people are clamoring for, in the social board mafia, is Marcus Satterfield, and he's the safest one of all, next to Matt Rule.
Well, a guy that is getting a lot of attention, Tony White. Let's revisit his black shirts this 2023 season, how well they performed, and carousel spinning, fellas, at a pretty good clip, as we don't know what's next for Tony White. Is it the 402 still for a second season, or is it somewhere else?
I think maybe he wants to stay here forever. No.
That's what Nebraska fans are wishing.
Right. Look, when it's amazing when you look back when he got hired and people were talking about this 3-3-5, and again, I go back to the social borders, like, well, this is a 3-3-5. You can't run that. And who's this guy? He's not been proven. And then you kind of get some feeling out of Syracuse that they were really sad to see him go. And Nebraska fans were pretty impressed with him after week one, and it just, I think, continued to get better as the season went on. But there was a lot of dismissal of the Tony White hire and the 3-3-5 scheme when, look, that's a scheme, that's a defense that did what defenses are supposed to do. Find the ball and go hit the guy who has it as violently as you can, and then get up and go play the next play. And that defense did the job. I think for him, I've said it for weeks, come back to Nebraska, continue to reestablish the black shirts, and you'll be like a Jeff Lebby, the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, who's been coveted the last few years, spent 2 seasons with Brent Venables, and has landed at Mississippi State. That's a big first head coaching job, and I think Tony White's in line for that with one more season at Nebraska.
Yeah, I think there's a real possibility he's back. My observation last week, leading up to the Iowa game, was that he was ready, very much ready to go if the opportunity presented itself, and it would have to be a good opportunity. And Syracuse maybe would be that opportunity. It's a Power 5 school, so San Diego State maybe could be that opportunity. Are they willing to double the head coach's salary? What kind of a role, what kind of a place is San Diego State going to have in the newly structured West Coast of college football, where nobody has a home conference? I watched Tony, and this is again part of the benefit of being down there on the field after the game. It was a fracas on the field after the game. There were staffers from Iowa and staffers from Nebraska, and I'm not talking about full-time assistant coaches here. I'm talking about like support staff people, and even some people in leadership positions who were angry with each other, who were getting after each other, who were yelling. There was finger pointing. There wasn't a fight, but there was an instance where I thought maybe there was going to be one, just with how high the tensions were because of the way that game ended. And there were Iowa players who were walking over to the Nebraska sideline and waving goodbye to the Huskers. Like as Nebraska waved goodbye to its bowl chances. And I caught Tony White. I caught a vision of Tony White. I walked past him, and Tony was completely tuned out to all of this. And he was kind of looking up into the sky, like up into the back row of the north end zone, or maybe he was looking at the big scoreboard up there. And he just had this just kind of this wistful look on his face, like, I couldn't help but think like that he was wondering if it was his final time on that field. And that's kind of the way that I felt when I listened to him talk on Tuesday last week. And then I heard Ty Robinson after the game talking about Tony White, and his message for the players going into that game was that he wasn't even going to coach them. He was going to let these guys rely on their training, and everything that he had done for them throughout the year, he felt was going to come out. And that wasn't, don't take that literally. Like, he still coached them. His point was that his guys, that he had done with them what he could, and that they should be able to win that game based on all that they'd learned over the last 9 months. So you put all that together, and I feel like if the opportunity's there, he's ready to go. But I don't know that it's going to be there. And as we get further along, and we're not totally there yet, I mean, it's not even December 1st, but if we get it a week or two down the road and it hasn't happened for Tony White, then I think the chances increase dramatically that he'll be back. And that would be a huge score for Matt Rule in Nebraska.
Mitch, and I was wondering, whenever I saw this on Twitter, your quote from Ty Robinson about Tony White before the game. There's not much coaching I want to do with you guys today. You guys, I mean, I trust you guys. I wonder if the literal quote back in the locker room was, "Guys, it's Iowa." Pre-game speech done. Guys, it's Iowa. But I will say here with Tony White, now that Texas A&M has hired Mike Elko as their next head coach, do you feel good about Nebraska, should Tony White leave, being able to go pull a guy like Elijah Robinson to come in and be a defensive coordinator? I know we briefly talked about this last week, but Texas A&M players were calling for Elijah Robinson to become the next head coach, according to what some of the inside sources down in Aggieland were talking about. And I think that would become the likely next option should Tony White leave, is you just go find a guy that's been on Matt Rule's staffs before and is loved by all his players, loved by the coaches that he's worked with before. Elijah Robinson seems to have a lot of respect in this industry, and you wonder if that's the next logical place for Nebraska to go, seemingly with Elijah Robinson out of a job. You don't know if Mike Elko brings him back. I know Mike Elko has some Texas A&M ties, and you don't know what his assistant coaching staff's going to look like, but I wonder if that would be a logical next step should Tony White be gone.
Well, Elko and Robinson coached together on the A&M staff under Jimbo Fisher for 3 or 4 years before Elko left to go to Duke. So there's going to be a connection there between Elijah Robinson and Mike Elko. And I think Elijah Robinson has a much better chance to stick at A&M as the defensive coordinator than he would have if A&M had gone through and hired Mark Stoops or Dan Lanning or something like that. So we'll see if Robinson wants to stay, if Elko wants him to stay, but they definitely know each other and have worked together before. So I think there's a chance.
Guys, let's get into the coaching carousel as that kind of leads us into it, the Average Joe Sports Show, and can find us on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod. Find us and subscribe on YouTube, the AJ Sports Show. Pretty wild carousel with Houston and Syracuse and San Diego State, Oregon State, Indiana, all open. The trial balloon on, hey, what do you think of this Stoops guy? Is, he just beats Louisville, wins the in-state rival in the Bluegrass State. The Twitter said, no, we don't want a Stoops in A&M. And I kind of thought with Elko's ties, he'd have been a good target. He's done really good work at Duke, and lo and behold, he got off the plane. So A&M's got their replacement fixed. I would bet mama's money that Michigan will be open here in the new year. Just from an NFL standpoint, and some of the teams probably looking at Harbaugh. Sparty's been filled, and the jobs that are open right now, Oregon State's kind of in no man's land. Indiana's a Big Ten job. Houston is in a Power 5 now, and they've got some re-upping to do with where they've been compared to where they're at. They got rid of Dana. And, San Diego State is a great spot. It's just not maybe on the same level as some of those other schools. And, of course, Syracuse in the ACC.
UTEP is open as well, who Nebraska opens next season against. Dana Dimmel's not coming back. I think it is intriguing about Michigan. I think most people think that it's a real possibility. You just brought it up that Harbaugh is gone. That will not fall for 2 months, right?
Likely.
You're talking if Michigan gets into the playoff and plays for a national championship, which is possible, that's not until mid-January, and then the NFL season doesn't end until basically early to mid-January. That's a long time for that coach's carousel to be riding and for Michigan to be, a player in the coaches that are available. Not that they couldn't find somebody and throw a lot of money at somebody to entice them, but that's way down the road if it's even going to happen. I find that to be a real wild card in this whole scenario.
If I'm the Vegas Raiders, I throw whatever Harbaugh wants at him just because he's the only thing out there for the NFL that's done it. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's won, and he's won at every level he's been at, and he's turned programs around. The Toreros, Stanford, resurrected Michigan, and before getting back to Michigan, he was great with San Francisco, and he was bold. How many guys get rid of a first pick overall, getting to a Pro Bowl level in Alex Smith, and say, all right, I kind of like this Kaepernick kid, and he takes him and does get him over the hump. So I think he's back in the NFL, likely. Chicago, I don't know if he'd pick that over Vegas. I know San Diego, there's rumors L.A. I always screw that up. But the Chargers could be open.
We already know the Panthers are open.
Right, and I think folks run and hide from any phone call from Carolina. So that's my thought. I think he's off to the NFL.
I have to ask Matt Rule when we talked to him this week about his thoughts on the Panthers job coming open after 11 games.
Now that A&M's filled, we don't have to bother him with that.
Yeah, no, not that he would be. Well, hey, maybe David Tepper wants to bring him back after he saw.
I'm sorry, my mistake.
The work of his replacement. Yeah. Sorry, Frank Reich didn't work out. Matt, you weren't so bad after all. I think the Michigan thing is definitely the most intriguing aspect of this coaching carousel right now, even though the job is not open. There's a lot of anticipation about what's going to happen there. And of course, you have Jim Harbaugh coming back. Chris, you're in the witness protection program again, buddy. But there you go. All right, good job. Of course, you have Harbaugh coming back this week to play Iowa, to coach against Iowa in the Big Ten championship. And I wonder, like, is there going to be any focus at all on the game, or is it all just going to be on Jim Harbaugh and what he's doing on the sideline before the game, during the game, as Michigan scores a touchdown, as Michigan gets a defensive stop, as Michigan blocks a field goal, as Michigan gets a safety, as Iowa commits a turnover? Like, it's all just going to be like, let's look at Jim Harbaugh. But I will say this about the Michigan job. If it does come open, I said a couple of weeks ago that one of the unfortunate aspects of this scandal at Michigan is that if he does leave, there are good assistants on that coaching staff who themselves have been stained because of their association with this cheating scandal. And strangely, I'm not sure if I feel the same way after watching how Sharon Moore has handled himself in beating Ohio State and out coaching Ryan Day, and then also the work that he did just to help just keep this team together. I realized Harbaugh was with them Sunday through Friday, but in keeping this team together on game day, they had an unexpected challenge against Maryland, and then obviously the Ohio State game and just everything that Moore did down there on the field. He had his emotional post-game interview after the Penn State game. So it's I feel like if Harbaugh leaves, that Sharon Moore at 37 years old is a legit candidate for the Michigan job, which sounds crazy because he's not been a head coach other than these 4 games this season, 1 early in the year, 3 at the end of the season. But he's been impressive.
But are you falling? Would they fall into the trap that West Virginia about 20 years ago fell into when? They had that coaching change. You win the Orange Bowl, and you give the guy the head coaching job, and it was a feel good for a while, but that didn't last long.
But on the flip side, you have the Ohio State.
I don't know that that's Sharon Moore. Maybe it is, but that is a concern that you're falling in love with the guy on a short sample over a short sample. But I'm intrigued by him.
I agree.
I agree. He's going to be head coach soon.
The flip side, though, is Ohio State with Ryan Day. Is whenever Urban Meyer was off, Ryan Day's the young cat comparatively to a lot of college football coaches. He's the hand-picked successor. I think we can kind of assume the same with Sharon Moore at Michigan, considering he got the interim gig from Harbaugh. I think you can assume that he's the guy that you pick. I don't think you need to overcomplicate that. And I'd go as far as to say Sharon Moore's performance over the past 3 games has really moved Michigan and what they do next down the pecking order in Big Ten storylines. I thought number 1 was going to be Michigan State, and then 2, what's going to happen with Tom Allen at Indiana. That's my most intriguing storyline from Big Ten coaching carousel, is that Indiana comes out and swings a big stick, $20 million buyout on Tom Allen. What are they going to do with their next? Are they going to go swing for the fences yet again and go spend some more money and show, you know what, with this new Big Ten TV media rights deal, we can play with the big players in college football? I think what Indiana does next is really, really intriguing.
Yeah, Gruden's name's been on the old Wikipedia for Indiana. Do you go get a Kalen DeBoer disciple? Because that's when Indiana was flying high, is with him and some of his associates. I know the offensive coordinator, his name's escaping me, for Colorado, is
Sean Lewis.
Sean Lewis is looking for a gig. He won in the MAC, if I'm not mistaken, and he was mentioned, when Colorado was up and coming.
Could take Tim Brewster with him.
Brewster's also out there, so it's
Warren Sapp's off the market.
Yeah, because he's going to Boulder.
So are all of Colorado's quarterback recruits.
Yeah, they are running as well, but
they're on the market, I guess.
They are.
Bill Stewart is the name of the
Bill
West
Smith.
Virginia coach.
Costal Kevin Steele is defensive coordinator title with Clemson that year. Someone had to fall for giving up 70 in the Orange Bowl.
If Indiana could get Sean Lewis and Tim Brewster, Lewis is the head coach, I would think that would be a solid hire for what they need in the Big Ten. Lewis was at Kent State before Coach Prime brought him to Boulder and then promptly demoted him. So he's looking probably to make a move, and that might not be a bad one for Indiana to go. I would approve of that more than Gruden. If they hire Gruden, that reeks of Les Miles to KU for me.
A name I love, though, and he hasn't had success anywhere but Texas. That's the big question mark with him. But what he's done down there, just won everywhere he's been. Jeff Traylor at UTSA.
Hey, he's awesome.
I think he's a great coach. And again, how is he going to do in the Rust Belt? Who knows? Is he going to go to Houston? That's the hire that makes a lot of sense now that they've let go of Holgorsen. But I think whoever gets Jeff Traylor is going to end up happy. He's just super
What about
impressive.
Tom Herman, if you want to talk about Texas coaches?
Herman was great at Houston and not so great at
but
Texas.
He might be taking the same kind of path as Lane Kiffin and getting back. And I don't know. I'm just saying that name's out there, and I can't believe that's where he's going to want to spend the rest of his career. And Gary Patterson, whose name was mentioned with Houston as well, along with Traylor.
Can we bring Bronco Mendenhall into this conversation?
Where does Bronco fit?
Yeah.
He could end up at New Mexico. He could end up at UNLV.
Yep.
I could see either one of those, but it's probably not a great fit in Bloomington, Indiana.
No, but yeah, you're right. He coached at New Mexico, as I recall, with Rocky Long, and so he has ties there. And then the church presence in Las Vegas. Yeah, I know it sounds a bit like a dichotomy or oxymoron, but the church's presence in Nevada would make him a good hire there if Barry Odom doesn't stay at UNLV.
Guys, let's wrap as you're listening to the Average Joe Sports Show, YouTube, the AJ Sports Show, Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod. You'll have the playoff rankings come out a little bit later on in the week with this. And right now, Michigan and Georgia look great. Florida State and Oregon seem to be your top four. Don't like penalizing a team that's unbeaten. I don't know if Florida State stays unbeaten against Louisville, although they look mortal. But you have Oregon and Michigan and Georgia that are playing at a certain level. Washington still undefeated. They look a little wobbly despite staying unbeaten. And to be honest, I think Ohio State would beat Florida State. I think Ohio State would beat Texas. I think Ohio State would beat Bama. So I'm here for the argument for Ohio State and Michigan to get in. Should Florida State fall short, and should Washington get beat? Give me two Big Ten teams.
I'm here really, and this is the last year of the college football playoff at 4 teams. So I'm here for the most crazy scenario that we can get. The 4-team playoff back in 2014, that was the first year. That's when TCU won on the final weekend of the regular season and dropped from 3 to 6. That was maybe the most. There's been controversy involving Alabama getting in as a non-division champ, or Ohio State getting in last year in that same situation. But I think that TCU slight back in 2014 is the most chaos that we've seen. So I'd like it to end that way this year. And really the way for that to happen is for Alabama to beat Georgia.
I think they do.
And then potentially to have no one from the SEC in, or you have to put Alabama in over like an undefeated Florida State, which very possibly could happen. Or I would also like to see it come down to the 4th spot between Alabama and Texas.
Yes, I was just going there.
Right, and then to have the committee pick Alabama,
yes,
even though Texas beat them head-to-head in week 2.
I'm calling it now. I think Bama beats Georgia. Bama has looked – I know the Iron Bowl, their performance did not look great against a not great Auburn team, but like – they
found a way.
Alabama doesn't go in there and win football games, at least in the past decade. It's a tough place for them to go win. They found a way to get it done. I've been a lot more impressed with what I've seen over the past 6 weeks from Bama, kind of responding from Texas. They've gotten a whole lot better as the year has gone on. Georgia's been coasting a little bit through most of the season. Georgia's been coasting. I think they're a great football team. I think it's going to be a great matchup. But I think I got Bama beating Georgia. I think Oregon beats Washington, and it sets up some absolute chaos for that fourth spot. Because then it comes down
Mitch
to
is here for it.
Comes down to Oregon, Washington, Texas, and Bama all kind of vying for that fourth spot.
Ohio State.
Elijah, I love that you're here for the ultimate underdog, Bama.
It was good to see something good to happen to them at the end of the game.
Right. I mean, they've just been through so much over the years. And by the way, Auburn, did they out Nebraska? I mean, it's
two-man rush.
Right. That has never happened. Nebraska's lost every way imaginable. And then as we talked about at the beginning of the show, they've lost some ways multiple times, the same unimaginable way and twice in the same season. But we've never seen that. We've never seen a 30-yard fourth down throw into the back of the end zone against a two-man rush for a walk-off.
The triple covering the guy in the middle of the end zone.
The play after Milroe goes 5 yards downfield and then backs up behind the line of scrimmage to throw a forward pass. That was an insane
after a fumbled
play.
Snap.
Oh, yeah.
Just the chaos at the end of that game was remarkable.
That was insane.
Look, I agree that I've said for a few weeks, I think this is the week that Georgia flexes its muscle and puts the hammer down. And it hasn't really happened. I mean, they've been
Georgia Tech.
They've been winning. Yeah, right. And I watched that. They have been, somewhat pedestrian, relatively speaking, for Georgia football. They have not gone out and dominated, just gotten better and better. And Alabama, Milroe has improved a great deal. Milroe over the last 7 weeks. I think that Alabama gets them. And I think you are set up for the top four and then the NIT. And there's going to be some really pissed off people after this selection is made. And I think Texas is out.
Well, we can only hope.
The question becomes, if Bama beats Georgia, is Georgia still in?
Yes.
Most likely?
No, you don't think? I think
I don't think so. I mean, it depends. If Iowa beats Michigan, then sure. But...
Sure.
You're looking at Ohio State, you're looking at Michigan, you're looking at Georgia, you're looking at Alabama, Florida State, Washington, Texas. Oregon, and Texas. Those 8 teams really, on any given Saturday, I don't think that there's a dominant one in the bunch.
Oregon's looking pretty dominant.
Oregon looks really good. I will say that. I think that they might be the best team. And I thought Harrison would win the Heisman Trophy based on his performance against Michigan. I think that goes to Bo Nix now. But I think you have 8 teams that could deservedly win a national championship, and 4 of them are going to be really pissed off.
You have a likelihood here of Florida State and Washington getting knocked off. If chalk stays where it's Michigan, Georgia, Oregon, Florida State, Washington going into the conference title weekend, you have Washington and Florida State get knocked off. If Ohio State stays in front of Texas or Bama, they move into that 4th spot.
Boy, I'd hate for something bad to happen to Texas where they got
they win the Big 12 and they lose. They're 11-1.
Oh, that'd be terrible if something bad.
Well,
here's a Fiesta Bowl.
It's going to make for a fun Saturday and Sunday. I know that, no matter what happens. But the more chaos, the better.
Agreed.
And we'll be back for the chaos possibly later in the week with another episode of the Average Joe Sports Show. Subscribe to YouTube, the AJ Sports Show. Find and follow on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod. That's Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. We'll talk to you next time on the Average Joe Sports Show.